All right, guys. Fula coming to you with another commentary. I decided to do this commentary because I'm actually reading a book about the United States occupation of Haiti and stuff like that, and it just goes into what was really going on at the time. Uh, it goes into the simple fact that it, the United States has always had a history of backyardism when it comes to the Caribbean and Latin America. It's always had this like toxic big brother complex when it came to the Latin American countries when it came to the Caribbean. It never had a sense of like, okay, these people need to be take responsibility for their own actions and govern themselves and stuff like that. The United States never had that in mind. They always, it was always, it was always up to, it was always in their mind to control everything that, for example, that Puerto Rico did, that Cuba does, that Nicaragua does, that Haiti does, and the Dominican Republic. So this was an old excerpt from the Mortal Kombat actor. I think his name is Mekan Brooks, and he was in Haiti, and he just breaks it down. And I want to add my little saison to it on how he breaks it down.
So Haiti is the poorest country in the world. However, you might be very surprised to find out why Haiti is the poorest country in the world.
Kind of not surprised because when you look at Haiti and how it's ran, believe it or not, a lot of the wealth in Haiti is controlled by non-black quote unquote Haitians. Like it's controlled by, I believe, some Jewish Haitians. I think you have some Italians up in the ranks as well. I think there's one mixed with Italian Egyptian. So like basically if you look at the structure of Haiti, then what happens is you'll see these people and you'll be like, wait a minute, are they Haitian? If you didn't know any better, you know.
Haiti was one of the richest places on the planet in the 1700s.
It's true. In the 1700s, Haiti produced more sugar and more coffee than I think all of the Caribbean colonies combined. I believe that's how much sugar, coffee, I think indigo, and things were being produced in Haiti.
The population of Haiti was 4-1 slave to free Frenchmen. So you basically
That's true too. I mean, a lot of time, the slave traffic was so heavy that the slaves would outnumber the enslavers, and that's not only including like slaves, that's also including freedmen who used to be slaves as well, you know.
had about 450,000 slaves there and 120,000, 125,000 free Frenchmen and women, led by a slave named Toussaint.
Now, I've said this in previous videos. There was always a history of maroonage, or you know what I mean. So Toussaint was kind of like, I want to say he was the result of what happened earlier, because you had a slave by the name of who's my who I like to call my nigga, basically. You had a slave by the name of um, Francois Mackendal, Rahmatullah alayh, and he kind of set in motion what was to be the Haitian Revolution. You know, he gave people the ideas, the slaves the idea that it's time to like take arms, it's time to stand up, it's time to fight this system. It's time to break tear this thing down. He gave them kind of like the idea of to do that. Then you fast forward, and you have Boukman, Duty Boukman, Rahmatullah alayh, and he decided that, let's continue on. He had his Wa Kaiman ceremony, and then, later on, fast forward, you had Toussaint, Dessalines, Henry Christophe, and the like thereof.
Haiti successfully overthrew one of the most powerful armies on the planet in 1804 and declared their independence. However,
but also, it wasn't just the French. They whooped the Spanish, and they whooped the British too.
France made a deal with them, with warships at the ready, saying that we will invade you, recapture you, and re-enslave you unless you pay for the lost property.
Basically, reparations. Like, what France made Haiti do is they're like, oh, well, you cost us collateral damage. You cost us so much in terms of capital, and that capital being slaves, that capital being the coffee, the sugar, and the like thereof. Because of these, actions, France made them pay reparations, basically.
Well, that lost property was the human lives of the Haitians themselves. So France slapped Haiti with a $21 billion bill. That's $21 billion in today's money. It took until...
Yeah, so imagine imagine $21 billion, and you are just coming out of a wartime situation, and you really need money to repair your country rather than to give it to someone else. And then on top of that, you are blockaded. In the process, you're blockaded from trade, international trade, to maybe increase your income and things like that. And then on top of that too, your country is invaded by the United States, and they came in 1915, and they didn't leave, and they just left the country more upside down, and they just left the country more in shambles. So you really didn't have time to develop and become the what I'm pretty sure the people who fought for their liberation had in mind. You really didn't have time to do that. You really didn't have time to develop. You really didn't have time to learn how to use the resources that your country had, because your country was going through so much turmoil anyway. And the United States added more turmoil by invading your country.
1947 to pay off the initial loan. It took Haiti almost 150 years to pay off that loan. And obviously you guys know about loans and financing and debt. So how did Haiti pay that money off? Especially because France forced them to give them 50% off of their products. So Haiti was accounting for 3/4 of the world's sugar at the time. and I think a quarter or maybe one third of the entire slave trade at the time. Saint Domingue was also known as the capital of the slave trade in the West Indies, and also the worst place for a slave to end up because it was so brutal, torturous, and you could be raped and kidnapped.
Okay, so to get into that, some of the things I read that the slavers used to do to the slaves, they used to castrate them. They would rub I guess they would rub like spices into wounds, basically. They would, yeah, rub spices into open wounds. Gunpowder, put gunpowder in the anus of a slave and then light up the gunpowder, you know, in when it's inside their anus. You know, that was just some of the things they did. Trying to think what else. Of course, rape, you know, we already know that was commonplace. Also, there was basically like if if a if a like slave was if a slave was like injured or something like that or hurt from the labor load, they most of the time they would just leave them to die, you know.
At any point in time and sent anywhere in the world. So that debt was financed and collected by French banks, as well as an American bank that was established in 1812, which is called Citibank. That's right. Your bank has been collecting money from Haitian people to pay for their own freedom since 1812 and stopped only in 1947.
So yeah, you know, America had to get a cut of this. Germany also had to get a cut of this. I think Germans came into Haiti and established financial institutions too, as well, when the pickings were green.
With the natural resources and the people working the land that Haiti had, it should have been one of the richest countries in the world. But the
And the truth is, Haiti has a lot of natural resources. You know, it's still sitting on a lot of natural resources. You have, I think you have like oil for sure, petrol for sure. You have a lot of natural minerals too, and you have also
transfer of wealth
land that can be used for different agricultural things too.
from Haiti to France and Haiti to French banks and Haiti to American banks to finance what is called the independence debt, which is no more than a debt for the descendants of slavery to continue to pay the countries and the people that enslaved them for their own freedom.
Yeah, basically, in essence, you take me from my homeland. I decide that, enough of this. I fight to show that I'm fed up with it, but I'm being punished because of the simple fact I wanted my dignity back, my respect back, and my sense of being a human back.
It's well documented. It's well documented that the debt was based on slave owners losing their property. In 2004, the Haitian government demanded that France pay back the billions of dollars that it forced the Haitian people to pay for its own freedom. So think about this. It's like
Well, France ain't gonna pay it back. To be honest with you, France just gave Senegal not too long ago. France just returned uh, a, a, a sword of a great Senegalese, um, I guess you can say it, what we call a murabit, meaning like a warrior monk type. Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. A warrior monk type guy. They just gave back his sword, El Hajj Umar Tal Al Futi, Rahmatullah alayh. The French just gave back his sword, but they still have many books and many rare manuscripts in the French museums of these great Murabitun, as we like to call it. And they're not going to return it. So I doubt they're going to return anything that they've pillaged from Africa. You know what I mean? I don't think they're going to return money for sure. Because, I mean, to be honest, France is struggling themselves.
France had their warships ready, just basically gangstered their way into Haiti's pockets. After Haiti beat the French military in 1804, by 1825, France had warships at the ready. Off the coast of Haiti, looking at the island like, nice island you got there. Be a real shame if something happened to it. Okay? So basically France is like, nice island you got there. Nice freedom you've gained there. Be ashamed if something happened to it. Wow. That's the most gangster, ridiculous, disgraceful shit I've ever heard in my life. In 2004, the Haitian government demanded that France pay back the billions of dollars it paid to protect its own borders and to be a sovereign nation. Can you imagine if you had to pay somebody so that they wouldn't attack you? If you had to pay somebody so that they wouldn't enslave you? If you had to pay somebody because your great-grandparents had been kidnapped and
And that's another thing too about these Dominicans, is that like in this book, in this book that I'm reading right now, okay, the French could have easily did the same thing to them. And the thing about it is when the United States occupation of Haiti happened, the United States were trying to take out Dominican Republic too. So you had you had Dominican guerrilla fighters as well as Haitian guerrilla fighters who were fighting the occupation, and they were actually fighting together. Okay, they were actually fighting. They were actually helping each other out. So when you hear all this anti-Haitian rhetoric from Dominican, the only reason why you hear it is because they finally just decided to sell out and become a backyard for the United States,
held hostage. And the price that you had to pay for a free life was billions of dollars to the people who did it. I'm trying to wrap my head around what that would feel like, and I guess you have to ask a Haitian person. Wow, France, really? Really? And
Well, shout outs to my Zoles, man. I mean, honestly, y'all treat me like I'm an adopted kid, basically. But all I gotta say is that I mean, like Cubans too. Like when you run across like real Cubans. I'm not talking about the Miami Cubans. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about real Cubans. When you go to Cuba,
after the Haitian government,
when you go to Cuba and go to these places, like those people, they still are resilient. They're still pushing forward and pushing through. For the most part, although they're going through a lot of shit, they still like manage to stay stoic and stay, you know, poker face through it all. I mean, I honestly think that the typical American, you put them in that situation, they will fold, you know.
Government demanded that France pay back the billions of dollars that it unfairly had to pay to France to keep their sovereignty, to keep their freedom, to keep their lives. 11 years later, in 2015, France said, fuck you.
I knew that. I mean, and that's the French, you know. I can go into how ruthless the French are when it comes to these former colonies. You know, France never did anything good with former colonies in Africa or in the Caribbean. You know, they never do. And then even to this day, France just keeps on taking from them.
Really, France? Wow, that's not going to age well. So if you've ever wondered why Haiti's so poor, ask France. This is the most egregious and famous independence debt that the Caribbean has had to pay to its former enslavers. But it's not the only one. Just imagine where this world would be if black people didn't have to pay back the children of the enslavers. Now, I really want you to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, I think for the most part, like, all majority black nations had to pay for, like, independence in one way or another. You look at, like, when African states started getting their independence, what happened? Puppet leaders, you know, civil wars, coup d'etats, CIA funded, you know, CIA like funded things to just destabilize these countries for being independent, you know. So I mean, like, independence did cost, like, black people.
A second. Where would this world be if the descendants of slaves didn't have to pay back the descendants of the slave owners? The descendants of slaves had to pay back a debt to the people who enslaved them and their children and their children and their descendants. Where would we be if that ridiculous shit never happened? Where would Haiti be right now if France gave them back the $21 billion that they gave them for their lives and their freedom?
Well, that's a tough question because at the same time, look at who Haiti's in control. Like look who really controls Haiti. Like, I can pull up like the whole oligarchs of Haiti. You know what I mean? And I can tell you they look nothing like your typical Haitian, put it that way. So I don't know. I really don't know.
People refer to reparations as if it's not owed, as if it's a controversial stance. However, nobody said shit when Haiti had to pay $21 billion just to keep their lives. So somehow it's controversial that the descendants of the people who were held hostage and kidnapped want to be paid for their troubles. want to be paid for the injustices done to their ancestors, and how those injustices play out and manifest in our lives today. There needs to be repair of that. However, that's a controversial issue, but it's not a controversial issue for some reason that the Haitian people and several other islands in the Caribbean had to pay back the slave owners and the slave owners' descendants for loss of property.
Well, it's true. There is a double standard. And, me being a like first generation immigrant, I can't really speak on like reparations or anything like that on behalf of people who want reparations. So I'm not going to really speak on it. I mean, I will say that I don't think the solution is like just a bag of money dropped off into every hood or whatever like that. I think the real solution would have to be like, I don't know, I never really thought of that, but it would have to be like something major. It would have to go beyond money, really.
Is it starting to sink in? I don't know what the answer is, but if you're French, I highly recommend that you reach out to your government and tell them to give Haiti their money back. It's fucking disgraceful. I love you guys. I'm just being honest.
Well, the French aren't going to do that because the thing is, the French are having problems even in their own country. Like, that's the thing. Like, France is not, like, in a good way right now. Like, as a matter of fact, my cousins and my uncle and my aunties who are there right now saying that things are, like, in an uproar, really. Like, even the native French people are fed up with it. But let me show you guys who controls the wealth of Haiti. Hold on just a minute. Let me show you guys. Let me show you guys real quick. Let me show you. Yeah, right here. These are the richest people in Haiti. Do they look like Haitians, though? When you look at these people, do they look like typical Haitians to you? But this is who controls it, But anyway, that's all I got. I just wanted to break that down since I'm reading this book about the United States occupation of Haiti, And, the United States did their number when they occupied Haiti, killed a lot of innocent people, raped the women. As a matter of fact, one of them, I think, raped so many women that he had like 246 kids, and he did that to whiten the race. And as a final note, and this is to Dominicans, the United States used to practice blackface, but they did blackface not only to Haitians, but they did it to Dominicans as well. So for Dominicans who think that they're somehow exempt from blackness, may want to rethink that. But anyhow, Fool is signing out. And Jot on.